Yes, hello my friends and happy Friday. I hope your week is coming to a nice, beautiful close. We woke up today with some very interesting news. Of course, we've been following the Steve Bannon saga, and we learned that he is going to be facing a 4-month prison sentence. Judge Carl J. Nichols came out and issued that ruling today. Sentencing was taking place. Both sides were there, obviously the DOJ and Bannon's defense, and the arguments were made. We covered many of them earlier this week when we went through the actual sentencing memoranda, and that's really where the bulk of the arguments are made, in those documents. And so we will cover this in detail today, but the highlights are 4 months prison and $6,500 in fines. They are going to stay the imposition of the sentence pending the appeal, which means he has that sentence, so it's going to be 4 months. But he doesn't have to self-surrender. He doesn't have to go into custody today. He can surrender mid-November unless the appeal is successful and the case comes back down, and then he doesn't have to self-surrender at all. So it is sort of a difficult sentence for him. Many people wanted to see him only get probation, and that was one of the arguments that we talked about. Bannon and the team made that argument in their sentencing memo, and we read through it and looked at it sort of by the statute. The statute, many people were arguing, and I think it reads this way. It does have a mandatory minimum penalty, which is the 30 days. So if you wanted to say that the judge just defaulted to the text of the statute and it was 30 days a count, then you could say, okay, well, you add both of those up. That's 60 days, that's 2 months. He got 4 months. So it's sort of a little bit more than 2 minimum counts stacked consecutively back to back. Remember, the government wanted a total of 6 months, which was, according to their interpretation of the sentencing guidelines, near max. And they didn't quite get that, but they got 4 months. And that, of course, is a pretty serious sentence. And we'll go through this in detail. There's a bunch of Twitter threads out there from all the reporters. The media sort of giddy about this. They're sort of, sadists in this way. They kind of wake up and they get excited when there's going to be some bad news for somebody who's closely connected to Trump. It's sort of, energizing in many ways for some weird reason. But they're into that. So a lot of reporters out there all just salivating. Why wasn't it 6? Rah! It should be 6 years. Insurrection. All that crap. On and on and on. But the case is coming to a conclusion, technically, now that the sentence has been ordered. It will be imposed later. But Bannon and his team, they still have opportunities, of course, to appeal, which they are doing. Very likely. And I think there's a real good chance on this thing. And I think that the judge, even Judge Nichols, communicated that at several points throughout the trial. And we covered this in detail, but for a quick recap, Bannon had a bunch of arguments that he was trying. He wanted to subpoena the J6 committee. He wanted to subpoena Nancy Pelosi, all sorts of questions about J6. And most of these were tried and thrown out. But there was a big argument that I thought was very good about relying on counsel. Bannon's not a lawyer, and he communicated over with his lawyers, several of them, who are lawyers, licensed to practice law, very credentialed, a lot of experience. And his lawyers were advising him to do a certain thing, and it wasn't based on an insane, bizarre theory. They were actually pulling documents and memoranda and policy papers from the DOJ, from the FBI. This is what happens when you send a subpoena and then somebody invokes privilege to try to avoid complying with the subpoena, and all this stuff. There's a procedure. This has happened before. And so the DOJ, they've got policy papers and they've got, different precedent that they followed when these issues have popped up in the past. And so Trump's lawyers went and they relied on all of that, and they said, okay, well, historically, this is how it worked, and so this is how we're going to respond, and we're going to advise our clients that way. And of course, as a lawyer, it's a scary concept to think that you can give your client advice, and because some judge or some stupid, fake, illegally constituted garbage committee suddenly deems it to be in the nation's democratic interests to go after their political enemies, and they want to constitute a political body to go after their political enemies, if that is something that happens, then you can see how that can be taken advantage of pretty quickly. And if the courts now just accept all of that and just sort of acquiesce to it, you can see kind of what a slippery slope that is. How do you have any justice if all of the different entities are colluding to wage a political war? Very difficult thing to do. We've got some construction going on here. We'll get off this screen in a minute. But we're going downtown a little bit today. Who's calling me right now? I'm walking and talking. No time for phone calls. But the issue that really was the most important one was about relying on counsel. And Bannon did that. That's his argument. So if you're a lawyer and now you're saying, wow, goodness, I can now suddenly become the subject of, I can sort of be responsible for my client's criminality. I advise my client to do a certain thing, and some judge in their discretion deemed that, kind of a bad decision. And so now your client goes to prison for 4 months over this because some fake committee somewhere decided that was, in the sake of American democracy. So it's kind of a joke, but that's where we're at. And there's a case on point on this that Judge Nichols brought up many times. And Judge Nichols, they're sort of, they have a lot of cover on this case because he was appointed by Trump. He's sort of a Federalist Society guy. It seems like he's pretty conservative. And he's in the DC circuit. So in the DC circuit, we now, we know what that jurisdiction looks like. We've covered that a lot, and what happens to everybody else in there. But, Judge Nichols is not going to deviate from the pack on any of this stuff. He's not going to turn around and say, well, we've talked about this. The J6 committee is illegal, or what's happening here is not constitutional, or any of those things because of separation of powers. He's still relatively low on the totem pole on this stuff. He's got the rest of the DC circuit to follow, plus the various courts of appeals and the Supreme Court. So he's just gonna, it's mechanical at this point, and that's essentially what he's doing, which is pretty routine, right? That's pretty routine in criminal cases. They're treating all of these cases like they're just regular, vanilla criminal cases when we all know they're not. And they're trying to commingle them to a degree that it's sort of hard for us to separate the two. Okay, we know what crimes are. By calling all of these other things crimes, you tarnish them and you sort of wash away their scent of credibility that they've been trying to spray all over it by saying that they are legally constituted and whatnot. But the point is, there is an issue that Bannon will very likely appeal, and Judge Nichols gave him some cover on that one as well. It's the case of Licavoli, which we covered at length. This is the case that says it turns on the question of whether or not you can rely on your lawyer for legal defenses. And Licavoli, Judge Nichols sort of acknowledged that that was binding, and that said that Bannon could not rely on that. But he sort of is inclined to believe that that's bad law, and that there's a possibility that on appeal, that gets reversed, and that this whole thing could come back down for a new trial. Because if Bannon was improperly precluded from having the ability to present a defense, then that's error. That's erroneous. And he should have that fair shake. How can you have a fair trial if you can't even present a fair defense? One of your key defenses. And if that case gets overruled and it gets sent back down for a new trial, the whole thing may start over again. So we'll see. And I think that is going to be an important issue of law for lawyers everywhere. It's like, can you provide advice relying on DOJ memoranda? Ugh. Because if you can't do that, it kind of changes the game a little bit. But not a good sentence. They will of course appeal it, and it does not look like Bannon is going into custody today. But all of that was sort of breaking as I was walking out the door. I was refreshing on Twitter. All right, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Before we got to get out here for our walk and talk. But you know, it's probably just the beginning. If we're being honest and real about all this, these are the trial balloons that they're sending up to see how all this works, because they can follow the same framework for Trump. They're sort of going that way. And we saw that from Liz Cheney when we played that clip of her yesterday, where she was, or maybe it was the day before, where she said, subpoena's coming. We expect him to do his duty as the president, you know. We would expect him to want to come and incriminate himself and beg for forgiveness in front of our garbage committee. So we expect him to do that. But if he doesn't, they said that, well, they can just follow a lot of the same frameworks that they followed in other cases, which we've covered here, of course, which is Bannon and Navarro. So Navarro's going down the same path, and you know, I believe this is all just laying the foundation, the framework for the big Trump indictment, which they'll drag on indefinitely until some point next year, timed simultaneously with his announcement. We've been talking about this for months now. Remember we talked about that when we first started these walk and talks? When was the timing? Was it going to happen before the midterms? That didn't happen. And that makes sense. You're going to bring out the big guns, which is going to be a big fat indictment when it gets closer to game time. And that's going to be closer to when an announcement is made, if an announcement is made. But sad state of affairs when we have our Justice Department going after their political opponents, and the judiciary is just like, well, separation of powers on this stuff. And it's Trump, so we better just make believe like this is all normal business. That's all they're doing. It's all just normal. Raiding presidents and so on, going after their deputies. We'll see if the Republicans do anything in response. I sure hope they do. Form their own stupid committees and subpoena everybody else. It's not good for the country, but their survival depends on it. Otherwise, they're going to be outgamed by the Democrats, as it seems like it's happening right now. But we'll see what Bannon's defense does. I want to give some shout outs. Man, I saw last night on Twitter that there's a whole another round of YouTube strikes going out there. Legal Mindset got struck. He posted that on Twitter. Said, well, here we are again. It's my turn now. Such a joke. So it was Brigade, then we got one. Legal Mindsets got one. I saw the Legal Vices got one. I saw KoolFrogg got one on YouTube. So YouTube's just making the rounds, you know, it's that season. And everybody's getting a strike. But you know, anytime that happens, we want to make sure we support these individuals, because most of this is just nonsense. And you know, it's one of those things, it's like, we've never spoken, but I feel like we're in good company. You get a YouTube strike for free speech purposes, you know, that censorship stuff. I think you're in good company. But that's a dangerous rule to apply. Got to be careful about that. We've got some serious popo on this corner right now. We got a surreptitious popo parked under the. Is that illegal parking? Is that a legal parking spot? Oh no, it's not. No, it's not. No stopping or parking right there. Popo, unbelievable. Typical. Maybe I should make a citizen's arrest. Here's another one. Yeah. But back to this censorship stuff. You know, the Legal Mindset did a whole stream in support of us when we got a big strike. And so I'm going to be sure to tag all of them on all of their channels down below. Hopefully these are mistakes from YouTube, but it's always very convenient how this happens. It feels, you know, I mean, it feels like it's sort of one side. They go just through a little genre, a little niche on YouTube. Boom, 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 boom. And of course, it's all happening in October. So, you know, anytime that you sort of rub them the wrong way or rock the boat a little bit, they start to, you know, exercise strikes. But there's another person who also got a strike, who I also support. I don't support what he said, but I certainly support him being allowed to say stupid things. Of course, we're talking about Ethan Klein. So he also got a strike. But his strike was a little bit more obvious. The Legal Mindset strike was evidently for a video that he made 4 months ago. Some YouTube, you know, intern is scrounging around the dark crevices, seedy underbelly, disgusting halls of YouTube, dark, corroded smell, sulfur. And he's like, oh, perfect, Legal Mindset. He's been out there banging the table about us. Let's find something. Rooting around in the gutters. They find some stupid violation that they can apply to any video, right? They don't tell you anything about it. And they give him a strike. So my understanding is that he has been appealed. This has been appealed. He's appealing it. So we're going to send our love and support over to Legal Mindset. KoolFrogg's going through it. The Legal Vices is going through it. Hang in there, my friends. Onward we must go. We will persevere. But certainly support them. They're down in the comment section, or in the description section, because it's ridiculous. Now, you compare and contrast some of these cases for some of these minor infractions for whatever it is, or even they're not infractions at all. Okay, like ours, like we just got a strike, appealed it. Oh, sorry, didn't know that one. What are you doing? You're interfering with our work here. Like, you shouldn't just haphazardly be able to, you know, turn off somebody's entire channel, which is for many people their entire source of business, you know, their entire livelihood, in other words. So they are doing that. But Ethan Klein is a big lefty, and he has a big podcast. He's got a huge following all over the place. Not real sure why, but he does. And he said something pretty horrendous that's not even funny. Now, you know, he's characterizing it as a joke, but it was a comment about Ben Shapiro and about if there's a new Holocaust, that he should be the first to go or something. And Ethan Klein is, my understanding, also Jewish. And after he said it, and if you watch the clip, it certainly doesn't sound like it's a joke. But I guess it's a joke. I mean, it's not funny, but I guess it's a joke maybe for him because he's Jewish. I don't know. You know, it's like one of those. Anyways, I don't get it if it's a joke, but okay. It sounded sort of malicious when he said it. So we're downtown right outside City Hall here in Phoenix. You can see City Hall's over there. The Phoenix Municipal Court is right here. We've got the Federal Court building, which is over here. So there's a lot of activity down here, including construction. But we'll get off this street. But Ethan made that comment, and then there was a big outcry, obviously, because that's a really awful thing to say. And Ben Shapiro took the high road, of course. And he said, well, you know, I mean, if that were to happen, if there was another situation like that, Ethan, I hope you and your family would be, well, alive and survive and not be exterminated. So you say, okay, that's a nice approach on that. But Ethan got a strike, and so he got removed from YouTube. You know, they removed that video, and I disagree with it. I think that the appropriate standard should be to let people, including their disgusting comments, hang out there. Let them stand behind them. And I think YouTube probably didn't want that to happen because it makes them look bad and it makes their side look bad. You know, if you let that big, awful statement linger on that platform and be shared millions of times and spread all over the place, well, then people will recognize that that's who these people are. That's who he is. That's kind of how he thinks. And that's, you know, jokey or not, it's just sort of in his spirit. And I think that stuff's important to leave on display. And that goes to all of the other types of speech, misinformation, disinformation, all of that stuff. But I certainly don't want him canceled. I think that's actually a disservice to everybody. We all would rather see that. And I think that's an even-handed standard. Ethan Klein is now out on Twitter and he's saying, oh, look, all the righties, all the conservatives, everybody who was, you know, demanding free speech, they're all now calling for me to be canceled. And I'm not so sure that I've actually seen that. I think that's sort of straw man. He kind of is just presuming that that is the belief on the other side. But I haven't seen anybody calling for him to be canceled. Right? That's one side's tactics. The other side, our side, says, let's see it all. Let's see it all. All the misinfo, disinfo, let's see it. Let's hear from the Russians. Let's hear from the deniers, okay, whatever it is. Whoever they are. Science deniers, election deniers. We want to hear from them all. And if their ideas are stupid, then we'll be able to debate them. But if you censor them, then nobody gets to see them. And, you know, Ethan gets to sort of walk away and escape some of that spotlight shining down with the help of YouTube. And we'll just cut it off for you. And I'd rather it stay, even if it is a disgusting statement. Let it stay so that we can all see it. But no, you know, they often get a lot of leeway. It's like a hair trigger for everybody else. You know, you get the legal mindset and others who posted a video 4 months ago. Well, we don't like that one. Okay. And it's just like that quote we talk a lot about on the show. Show me a man, I'll show you the crime, right? Our statutes are so overly burdened and gigantic that it's possible to find criminal charges for anybody in any way, shape, or form at any time. And YouTube has that same authority. Misinformation, violence. And it's always conveniently done towards one side. Unless there's a clamoring on the other side, right? Unless you have an account like Klein's, who is massive, and then there's a public outpouring, and then they say, okay, we better apply the policy to our side this time. Give them a strike. And on the world goes. But certainly support your local content creators, because it's probably going to continue to heat up. You know, there are a lot of people in positions of power that know that they have leverage with these tools. Elon's going to be acquiring Twitter. Looks like that deal's going through next week. And, you know, these little skirmishes now are going to heat up into full-blown wars again, just like they were after J6. If Trump announces and we go down that road again, where every single institution becomes weaponized for political gain. But this time, I think the right is a little bit more anti-fragile, a little bit more resilient. And they're not going to get caught again the way they did last time, which is all good news. But my friends, it's Friday, so we're wrapping up the week. We'll be back tonight with the show. Trump has a trial starting next week against the Trump Organization. It is a criminal trial. He's being prosecuted by the Manhattan Attorney's Office, of course. So I think jury selection starts And so we may do some previews on that. We'll see what else happens. Fridays can be busy, Fridays can be slow. We'll see. Sometimes it depends on if Biden mumbles something that instigates nuclear war. We'll just have to wait and see. Could be dull, could be very exciting. And I don't really know which one to hope for. But it's an amazing day. Hopefully you are out there getting some fresh air, getting some sunshine, breathing through your nose so that you properly condition the air going into your body. It's much better than breathing through your mouth. In, out if you want. It's better that way. And you can do the 4-7-8 breathing too. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out, times 4. But do it when you're seated and not operating heavy equipment like these guys, because it can make you a little bit lightheaded. But it's very good for your anxiety. And we all could use a little bit of that. But have a great day, my friends. We'll be back tonight on the show. Same time. We'll jump on a little bit early, a couple of minutes early on Locals, and stick around for the after party. And I look forward to seeing you there. Bye-bye.